UCRF Knowledge Circles. We are here to build conversations and we are here to learn from one another. UCRF is a really safe space, and we wanted to create this platform to exchange insights, to create future looking implications, and to lead a debate that will help us empower our activist knowledge ecology. My good friend and UCRF board member Vinit is here with me. Vinit, hi, welcome.
Hi.
Mhm. How are you? How's everything?
Good. Everything is good.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Vinit, I and other board members at UCRF, we were discussing and we were thinking how we can also empower our members, our community, our friends to ask questions and to bring research front and center to create implications for policymakers, for industry people, but also for other researchers, especially in today's context in which all these ecological, political, social crises are intertwined. We need actions and we need proper, profound, and impactful implications. So that's why we wanted to bring different disciplines together. We wanted to bring different domains to make sure fashion as a system will be transformed. But to do this, we will also challenge the underlying business conditions. As you know, UCRF has this wonderful manifesto, which is quite relevant and timely. So please check our manifesto on the website. And we are here to really challenge these basic assumptions that will just lead us to have incremental change rather than transformative systemic change. So that's why we wanted to launch this knowledge series, and bi-monthly we will have these meetings and these workshops to discuss research and to bring together our community. And we will be following a tidal schedule, meaning our time zones will be changing and we will have different time setups just to make sure we will be able to host as many people as possible. But you will find all the recordings here on YouTube. And please join us in these conversations. And today we are kicking off our first UCRF Knowledge Circle session. So welcome everyone, and we will see you in a minute. Jean-Sébastien, thank you so much for being here. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the intro. So let me just share my screen. All right. Can everyone see?
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So thank you. I'm really excited for this opportunity to kind of kick off this oh my God. How does this work? Okay. I got it. To kick off this knowledge circle series. The paper is not published. It has been submitted and we published the preprint. Okay, but I just want to make that clear. It's not yet published. But yeah, so today I want to talk about a project that was really core to my PhD dissertation. It's my latest project, Green Synergy, a three-party fashion retail system balancing profit maximization and impact minimization. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it already gives you a good hint of what I'm going to talk today about. So synergy between parties in the fashion industry and balancing profits with environmental impacts. So it's a project that I did in collaboration with my supervisor, Mehmet, and a collaborator in the Netherlands, Robert Rudekerk. For those that looked at the paper, it's very rich, it's very dense. So I'm going to give like a quick overview of this whole research project, and then we can discuss it more in the Q&A after. Just so you know, I have 2 polling questions for you during this presentation. So just to keep your phone close or have like a tab ready. I'll give all the information when we get to those slides, but I just want to let you know that those are coming. Okay. So as a researcher in operations management, I'm interested in how firms behave, how they can make best decisions, how they can improve their operations, how they can innovate, right? And the question that motivated this project and more generally me going through the PhD process was, how can we present a strong economic argument to really kind of drive the sustainable switch, the sustainable transition in the fashion industry. All right. So in other words, how can we make an argument for sustainability being affordable to brands, right? Because too often I hear, fashion companies say, well, I don't know, it's costly and people don't buy it. Why should I do it? Okay, so the idea was kind of to challenge a little bit this idea for brands and retailers in the fashion space. Right. And so the first question is, well, how can we drive this change, right? In the first place, what there are many ways we could do this, and this is where the first point question is. I want to know, how do you think we can drive the transition to more sustainable production practices? Okay, so I have 7 different options. So should consumers change their habits? Should retailers need to stop thinking only about profits? Regulators need to step in. New business approach, new technologies or innovation. AI will be the great solver of everything, or it's just too late, we're doomed. Okay. So to answer for those that one, there's a poll. You can either scan the QR code or you go to slido.com and you can put in the numbers, so 2767009, and you can go ahead and start answering the poll. And let me know if it's not working, by the way. It should work, but if there's anything, because it should update. Aha, okay. So it's started. We have one. Okay. Oh, tight race. I'm gonna give you maybe a few more seconds. Oh, okay, so new technologies, regulators, 6. Okay, so it seems like regulators and new technologies are kind of clear winners, and then retailers need to stop thinking about profits and new business approaches. Okay, so let's move on. So as you saw from the previous slide, or the polling question, right? I'm interested in, as an operations manager, in how firms behave and what they do. But to drive the sustainable switch, there are other parties that are involved, right? It's not only the fashion brands, it's not only the fashion retailers, right? So those, they don't operate in a vacuum. You have the consumers, and you also have governments and regulators that can step in and kind of force things or changing things a little bit. All right, and so those are the 3 parties that you could say at a very high level interact with each other in the fashion industry, and that we're specifically focusing on for this research project. All right, so you have the consumers that in the past have been very vocal about demanding more sustainability features, more actions, but it seems that sometimes it's a bit hard for them to follow through with their intentions or with their demands, right? And that's precisely kind of what the retailers are accusing the consumers of doing, is that they're asking a lot, but whenever we put we offer you some sustainable options, you're not buying them, right? And on top of that, for retailers or brands, well, there aren't really any strong regulations right now, so they don't have any incentives to change how they're doing things. And finally, while the regulators, they're just there and they're trying to, decide what's best to usher the consumers and the brands into more sustainable behavior. So they're only really starting to put in place strategies. Strategies, regulations, laws, whatever. Right. So currently, there's a lot of kind of blame shifting. Everyone's like, "Oh, you're not doing enough. You're not doing enough. You're not doing enough." And this is really, really detrimental to actually getting momentum in this, sustainable transition, because it prevents, like, the consumers are there in their corner. They're not able to understand really sustainability efforts and have low willingness to pay for anything sustainability related. The retailers have a really hard time deciding what to do with this. Should they offer? Should they not offer? Right? They don't have any regulations, so they have no incentive. And then the regulators are just struggling to define regulations. Okay, fair regulations that would ensure this transition. So our research project was really trying to look into this misalignment and gain deeper insights into what the consumers want, what are the trade-offs for the retailers, and what are the regulatory goals, and do a robust kind of economic analysis to try to propose solutions so that everything is a bit better aligned and we can really drive this sustainable transition. So this led us to 3 research questions. So the first research question is much more looking at the consumer perspective. So what are consumer preferences and willingness to pay for environmental attributes? I'm going to define those in just a second. The second research question was looking at the retailer's perspective. So, okay, what is the retailer's impact if we start, restricting environmental improvements? If, now that we understand a bit better how the consumers, what they like and what they don't like, how can they best behave? And then finally, the third one was really like, how can we move the solution forward? And because our second research question was already constraining a little bit the brands of the retailers in the fashion space, we decided to look at what could we do with the consumers, right? Because the consumers also have their role to play into this whole solution to this challenge. So we were interested in looking, well, can increased consumer awareness help with this trade-off between profitability and environmental impacts? So what do consumers really prefer, right? We know that sustainability is not super well understood by consumers. It's still like a vague term that everyone knows, but no one really knows what it is. So to kind of measure consumer preferences, we ran a choice-based conjoint experiment. So it's an experiment in which we ask respondents to repeatedly choose one out of many options. And then the data that we collect helps us infer their preferences, okay? So our setup was that we asked, so there were 20 choice tasks, right? One after the other. And then the respondents were asked to choose one product out of 3 alternatives. So 3 different products with different, varying levels of different attributes, or a no choice option, which was, well, those 3 alternatives I really don't like, so I would rather not pick anything, okay? And at the end of those 20 choice scenarios, we asked them to rank the environmental attributes that we were interested in. Okay, so from the most important to the least important in reducing environmental impacts of a product, a fashion product. So I keep talking about environmental attributes. I'm going to define them for you just now. So our conjoint experiment, we collected data for a hypothetical sweatshirt category in a hypothetical fast fashion retailer, okay? And we described those hypothetical sweatshirts with 6 attributes. 3 attributes that we called base attributes, which are kind of the attributes that we knew respondents would know, right? They're used to seeing when they go shopping. So bill of material, the type, and the price, okay? And then we had 3 environmental attributes. So those were really the core focus of our study that we define also, that we use to define our sweatshirts. So recycled content, durability, and circularity design, okay? And those 3 attributes were inspired by the EU strategy for sustainable and circular textiles, because they are kind of the 3 main sustainability dimensions that are heavily discussed in that strategy. And they also kind of loosely represent 3 different life cycle phases of a garment. So we thought those were really good attributes to kind of test the knowledge and preference for consumers, right? And here is the second polling. So out of those 3 environmental attributes that we were looking at in our study, so recycled content, durability, and circularity design, which one do you think is the most relevant in lowering the environmental impact of a sweatshirt? Okay, so durability seems to have the lead. Okay, I'm gonna give a few more seconds if anyone else wants to put in. But it seems like durability is a clear winner. Okay, and that's interesting. So durability, circularity, and recycled content 0. Okay. So here, how this compares to our results. So we got these results from all the choices experiments. So we had like almost 500 respondents in our survey, in our experiment. So we compiled all of this and we were able to measure attribute importance, right? And what we see is that, well, price is by a very large margin the most important attribute when respondents choose what they're going to pick. Okay, choose what alternative they would like to buy, and by as much as 3 times more than any environmental attribute, right? So that tells us that, you know, the consumers are very, very, very price sensitive. And then between the environmental attributes, we see, well, circularity, design, and recycled content are equal, and then durability is like the least important of all attributes and of environmental attributes. Okay. And I want you to remember this order, and I want you to remember also that, you know, our experiment, the choice-based conjoint experiment, is a type of experiment that's supposed to mimic a bit better than, you know, just a survey, how people make choices in real life, right? You're presented with alternatives, you have to pick one, okay? And so this is the results that we get from such an experiment. I'm saying this because we also ask people to rank, right, from most important to least important, the environmental attributes. And this is what we get, okay? So how to read this table is that the majority of the respondents in our experiment rank durability as the most important environmental attribute, okay? Just like what happened a few seconds ago. The second most important would be recycled content, and third most important would be circularity design, okay? And if you remember the previous slide, this is the exact opposite of, you know, the behavior that we saw when they had to pick and choose between different alternatives, okay? And so this means two things. Well, one, it clearly shows that, you know, consumers are a bit confused about sustainability, about, you know, how they understand and interpret their sustainability intentions, and why they might have some trouble kind of following through on those intentions, right? And then the second thing that I just want people to be aware of is, you know, depending on the kind of survey or experiment that you'll run, you might get very different insights into how consumers behave or what they prefer, right? So I think that was a very interesting result that we got from this part of the survey. So great. So now we understand a bit better how the consumers behave. The core question that we wanted to get to is, how can a retailer develop a product line that balances profitability and environmental improvement, right? If you subject it to restrictions, regulations, however you want to call it, on improvements. And it's an important operational question because, well, there's no doubt that sustainability is better. More sustainability is better, but it comes with a higher production cost, which means a higher selling cost usually. And as we saw, well, consumers are quite price sensitive, so it means that you might run the risk of people not purchasing because it's just too expensive, right? So where is that sweet spot? Where is that trade-off between profitability and environmental impact? So to do that, we did an assortment and pricing optimization exercise where we took, you know, all this behavioral insights from our experiment, and then we created different product versions, you know, ranging with different levels of sustainability given the different levels of each environmental attribute. We made assumptions on the cost structures of those environmental attributes. We were able to assume a cost for each of those versions. We were able to also assume an environmental improvement score, we called it, for each version. And those scores were very simply defined as follows. If you had level 0, you had 0 points. If you went to level 1, so for example, from 0% recycled content to 15% recycled content, you were getting 1 point, right? And from 15% to 30%, you were getting 2 points, and so on. Okay, so we did like a very simple environmental scoring for each of the products. And then the regulations were of the form, well, the total improvement score for all the products you have on offer should be greater than X. Okay. And so we put that in our mathematical program. It was looking at all the different product versions. We asked it to pick 5 products that would maximize the profits while meeting environmental improvement constraints that we set. Okay. And the output was, well, we were getting the 5 optimal products that would make this hypothetical product line. And then we ran this 150 times because we had different constraints, right? We had one constraint per environmental attribute, and then different kind of combination of those led us to do 150 different combinations. And that allowed us to build a Pareto frontier. So Pareto frontier, and quickly, is it's a curve that shows the optimal trade-off between profitability and environmental improvements. Okay, and that's a really useful tool because it gives a visual to brands, to researchers, to whomever, of, you know, if we're constrained up to this point, this is what's going to happen with the profit. Okay, so this is one of the Pareto frontier that we got for just constraints on recycled content. And I'm showing this because the main result we got from our optimization exercise is that actually the Pareto frontier is flat between the status quo and moderate improvement constraints. And what that means is that without harming profits, without any drop in profits, you know, brands and retailers can already start offering more sustainable alternatives in their product lines. Okay, so they can stop complaining and they can start doing. Basically, is the main result from this part. And we also found that the optimal product line always included a mix of, you know, less sustainable and more sustainable products. Okay, I'm gonna get back to that point a bit later, so just keep it in mind. So we understand better the consumer. We understand how, you know, retailers can make more optimal decisions in terms of, you know, sustainable transition. And then the last point we wanted to check was, well, how can we drive the sustainable change can increase consumer awareness help? And how we answered that question is, in our experiment, the choice-based conjoint experiment that I told you about before, half of the respondents, before going to the choice scenarios, before answering, you know, those repeated 20 choices, we showed them a short video, okay, 2.5 minutes. And in that video, we described at a very high level how each of the environmental attributes would contribute to lower environmental impacts of a sweatshirt. Okay, like in very general terms, just to make them more aware of, you know, environmental impacts of production and durability and how they dispose of their garments. And what we found is that there was a shift in consumer behavior, but it was very small. Okay, so there was a bit of a reshuffle of importance, mostly from bill of material, that decreased and increased in the importance for the 3 environmental impacts. But the most important result from this is that we saw that awareness made consumers more selective. And the way we saw this is, you know, as I told you before in our experiment, you had 3 options and the option of not selecting anything. So our experiment allowed us to measure the probability of a respondent or a consumer to not choose anything if they're, you know, in a purchase decision scenario. So what we see here, and how we understood that awareness makes consumer more selective. So you have the purple line, that's the control group, so the group that didn't see the video, right? And so we see that the no choice probability increases as the improvement constraints increase, because what happens there is that as you constrain brands to put more sustainable products in their assortment, they have to, they won't oblige, but those products are going to be sold at a higher price. And for consumers that are super price sensitive, that translates into a reduced probability that they won't actually purchase something because they're like, it's too expensive for me. I don't want to buy it. For the group that saw the video, what we see is that, first of all, when there are no constraints, so in scenarios where you have more products that are a bit less sustainable, already the no choice probability is higher, right? So those consumers are a bit more aware that, high impact products might not be worth buying in the first place. And then as you constrain, so as you force the brands or the retailers to put more sustainable options, even if they are more expensive, the probability of no choice decreases. So the probability that a consumer will buy something increases. And that's a really, really important result because, well, first, it's very encouraging for anything that has to do with consumer awareness, consumer education. But I think it's also a very encouraging message for the brands, telling them, well, look, if you engage with your consumers, you will have a return on investment because it will make you, it will help your brand image and it will make you more competitive. Okay. And I'm already a bit over time, so I'm just going to wrap this up quickly. This is my last slide. What do I want you to take away from kind of this, our project? What are the main conclusions? Well, for consumers, sustainability is not a priority and it's still misunderstood, but there is interest. Okay. And this is what we see, right? We saw that for those that didn't see the video, they're very price sensitive. They don't really care about environmental attributes. But once you show them the video, once you engage a little bit with them, you see a shift in behavior. For the brands, they can stop hesitating and they can start acting. I think that was very clear. It's very clear in our project. And we also showed that, well, if you engage with people, if you put more sustainability, if you offer more sustainability in your assortment, this is going to help your competitiveness and you can yield a significant return on investment. And finally, for policymakers, policies need to be gradual and flexible. So what I mean by gradual is that to try to not go too far too fast. And that's important because you need to give time for the brands to adapt. They have to adapt their sourcing, their supply chain, everything. And you have to give time to the consumers to learn what's important and how the policy landscape is changing and the offer is changing. And flexible in the sense that, I told you that the optimal product lines always had a mix of low and high impact products. And I think it's important for us advocates and for policymakers to keep this in mind, that, allowing for brands and retailers to mix a bit more than just saying like you need across the board to meet a certain level, can help in this transition because the less sustainable products usually have a higher margin. They will be probably purchased by a majority of their consumers, but that can help in funding their sustainability transition. So taking that away from them might make it harder for this sustainable switch. That's it. That's at a very high level. This research. I know there's a link in the email, but you can scan the QR code here. You can scan the QR code with my picture there. That's my LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me, I will be more than happy to continue talking about this and other stuff. I can talk forever about this these topics. And I think, yeah, I think that's it. Whoever has questions, I'm really looking forward to engaging in a conversation with our community. So please ask away.
Jean-Sébastien, thank you so much. This was really inspiring and also quite timely. So thank you for sharing your insights. And now UCRF is a really safe space to build information, to challenge assumptions, and to again develop further knowledge with impact. The floor is yours and the microphone is open. So anyone that has any questions, please feel free to just ask, and we are here to hear from one another. So no judgment, no criticism. We are here to again to build and develop knowledge. So please don't be shy and ask your questions. And if we have scanned the papers and LinkedIn, maybe Jean-Sébastien, we can stop
Should I
sharing the
stop sharing my
screen,
screen? Yes.
and then
There
it
you
will be
go.
more conversational and more inclusive. So
Yes,
perfect.
absolutely.
And at the same time, Jean-Sébastien, you can also turn the table and ask us questions. So you can also ask us how we can help you, how we can actually help you build your information, your research, your implications further. So also this is quite two-way street. So also feel free to
Yeah,
ask us any questions.
I have questions for the community, but I want to give the opportunity for people to ask me question, and maybe, you know, those questions will meet in the middle or something. So I just want to give the audience maybe a chance to ask a few questions, because I went really fast on some topics. I just kind of skimmed over a lot of the details. So if people have, you know, questions about assumptions or, you know, what this means and whatever, yeah, I'm all ears.
I can break the ice, and please, those of you with questions, don't be shy and just fire them away. But Jean-Sébastien, just then let's kick off this discussion. I'm also realizing that awareness is high, but unfortunately, attitude and the real behavior are two different things, and oftentimes we don't translate our intentions into real purchase decisions at the consumer side, especially in today's context in which all these crises are intertwined. Unfortunately, sustainability is not becoming a main priority for many consumers, and you somehow actually explain this, and then sustainability perhaps is not the main top priority. But at the same time, if we keep waiting for consumers to be aware or to go for sustainable options, then the progress will be quite limited, because we can't actually lose the momentum. We can't wait for people to actually ask for sustainability. We need to make it happen. Here, I want to provoke a little bit from the supply chain angle, which is my expertise. Actually, when we frame conversations from the brand's level, sustainability is coming with an expense for the suppliers, and the cost, quality, sustainability, all of those demands are creating tensions and paradoxical issues for the suppliers, and then it becomes a really unfair business practice, because suppliers are literally squeezed by the demands that actually brands are making. So in this perfect storm, where to start? How can we actually make sustainable something? How can we make sustainability something equitable, viable for everyone? Where to start? How can we actually develop this supply chain sustainability with things so then consumers also can be provided for?
That's a really good question. And I think, I mean, how I would answer this is, well, first of all, in our project, right, we only focus on 3 environmental attributes, I call them, and even those are very generic, right? But I think what's important is that you have, in this kind of tension between attitude and behavior, you had you know, recycled content that seemed to be very high when people in purchase decisions, but very low in intentions. And one of the reasons, right, this recycled content versus durability that I didn't talk about, but it's an assumption, we haven't tested it, but the reason why recycled content is so high in a real, you know, purchase behavior is that you kind of have instant gratification for this, right? If you buy something with 50% recycled content, you can kind of post it on social media immediately and say, like, look what I did, I'm such a good person. Versus durability that has a very high temporal discounting, right? And the reason why I'm saying this is that if we want to really keep doing, like, keep this momentum alive in a time where sustainability is no longer a priority, I think we need to really come up with a list of, you know, sustainability efforts or features or whatever that have like the kind of quickest return for the consumers, right? So that, you know, they participate in this thing quickly and immediately. We cannot ask them to understand durability, even if it's probably one of the most important, right? Because if you just keep your clothes for longer and you buy less, it's going to be overall better, but that's not how people think, right? So getting to the durability is a very long-term effort, but more recycled content, more, I don't know, sustainability incentives and stuff like that, I think are what's going to keep this whole kind of momentum and transition alive. So having maybe a bit of a more exhaustive list of things that can be ranked in how likely they are to be adopted by consumers versus, the cost to implement them. And actually recycled content, I think, is a really bad example because, the whole supply chain for recycled content is a bit hard right now, right? So recycled polyester, cotton, there's very little of it and you cannot scale it to like industrial levels. So how can you do this even though if you have like a very high demand for this and people will actually buy a lot of it immediately? So I think it's this kind of trade-off between how likely people are gonna, accept this and pay for it versus, the real cost. And I during my PhD, I looked a bit less at the whole supply chain stuff. I was really at the interface between consumer decision and business decision, right? So I was kind of halfway in marketing and halfway in operations management. But I think that's the answer. It's really to kind of pinpoint those easy gains, those low-hanging fruits, to really keep this momentum going while still working on the longer efforts. Like, for example, really teaching people that durability is something that's very important and is worth investing in, if I can say it this way.
Absolutely. No, this sounds great. And also one of the reasons why I asked the question the way I asked, because it was actually quite complementary. Your marketing discipline and then operations management are actually quite intertwined, and there are many implications between those different domains. And what is also really interesting, when we look at durability, also suppliers want to be able to produce more durable items, because when we change the collections this fast, or when we play with the material input in this really unsustainable way, effects are also somehow at the workers level, and both operational pressure
absolutely.
and also physical and also psychological pressure of all these big changes are felt at the worker level. Also, it is a really interesting way of translating what happens at the factory can impact also the consumers and their mindset, because also sometimes when consumers are so detached from what really happens at the factory level, they don't illustrate the problem, but actually when they realize, they have further insights and implications. So it is also nice, like really in a nice twin transition between marketing and operations management. So thank you, Jean-Sébastien.
No, I like this dimension because it is true. Like for my PhD, I focus a bit more on the environmental impacts because those are a bit more easily quantifiable, right? Rather than kind of the social impact. But it is true, and I think it's not talked about enough. The human component of the production, right? Because we always talk about greenhouse gases and stuff like that, and that's great. But whenever there's something like the Rana Plaza or a few months ago in Ghana when there was this fire, like when the human component comes into play, like people react to this, but I think it's too often forgotten in the messages and the PR efforts and stuff like that. So yeah.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Fashion is one of the most labor-intensive industries, and the
Yeah,
human
that's the less discussed.
it is at the heart of the industry, but then
Yeah.
we make this industry really inhuman, and then we always see workers as commodities and resources to be optimized. That's why we have UCRF here, to make sure we will challenge all these assumptions, and we will create this activist knowledge ecology in which we will see humans for who they are, not what they can be optimized for. Any more questions for us, for Jean-Sébastien? Don't be shy. Oh, okay,
First
Alessia.
of all, hi
Wonderful.
everyone. It's very nice to hear it again, the voice of Jean-Sébastien. We met last week here in France. So I had already the chance to talk with him, and having this speech right now, like about the question that we were having, that were arising. So I will give a little bit of introduction of what I'm doing. So I'm working on the industry of luxury fashion. So maybe it can be a little bit more specific on one direction. It's not really generic fashion. And I'm working on the sustainability operations too. For my work, I'm working a lot for qualitative papers. So I'm doing a lot of interviews in this sense to both textile companies working for luxury fashion and fashion companies, and also having investigated the part of the marketing side, because somewhat these works are going there with their topics. So what I found in literature, being an academic, is that works are really focused sometimes on marketing, and we are starting from there. I can see that there is this thing about fashion, which is following a trend. And it seems from my interviews too, that also companies, suppliers of fashion, luxury fashion companies, are following trends in this term. What do I mean by that? In terms of like upwards, it seems that they are following what, of course, the company wants. Okay, so they told me that, of course, they have the bargaining power. And it seems that there is a sort of bilateral trend. And why I'm saying this, I mean, I know that it seems it's not connected to the sustainability, right? But what I feel is that sustainability is not a priority, as you said, as we can see how the world is going on from this point of view. Maybe that this can be a way of seeing it in a different way. So if people that are buying these products wants to follow trends, can we try maybe to make it feel like a trend sustainability? Would it work? I don't know if there are works on that, but that's what I was thinking about. Also because, I mean, this is a characteristics of this type of industry, very specific. And the trends are coming not just, of course, from the companies, but also from social events that are happening. So, I mean, I was just, it was just, it's not a question. It's just a thought, just to think what you think about this, in case.
Yeah, I mean, I think it fits, I guess, in the broader topic of how can we educate consumers and how can we make them more aware, right? And I think, yeah, I think those are questions that I spent less time thinking about, but I think they're super important because I think this supply chain stuff is very opaque to the end consumer, right? That, you know, a consumer has no opinion on whether you choose supplier A or B if, you know, they offer more or less the same stuff, the same material, or that their emissions are the same. But, you know, one might pay their workers a fair wage and the other one doesn't. So how does that translate to the consumers? So I think, if I understand what you said, I think this fits in this idea, and that, you know, I guess transparency is the best probably tool we have to in this fight, and to make it cool, to make it trendy, to care about those things, is something that yeah, I think needs to be done. And maybe actually with the way the world is going, where supply chains are, you know, on fire and geopolitical risk is at its rise, maybe that's where, you know, the consumer now is going to start looking more at supply chains. That maybe was not the focus of things before. It was other stuff. It was, sustainable, it was greenhouse gases, it was, water scarcity, whatever. But maybe now it's going to shift to supply chain. So maybe this is also a way that we can keep, the sustainability idea relevant by kind of attaching it to, what does it mean now that supply chains are disrupted? How does that affect us, right? And yeah, maybe this is one way, one opportunity we can take to kind of keep this message relevant also, for both, trying to work with the industry to make it better, and then for consumers to help them understand and to help them maybe put a bit of pressure on their favorite brands. Does that answer the question, or?
Of course, it's just the comments. Like, it's very nice to hear the other opinions, and I mean, as a consequence of these results, it would be really would be really interesting to understand really what is not working, because for sure we are trying, not me for sure, but I mean, we like a community, and we like people working on these topics, we are trying to show that there are these type of issues, and it would be very interesting understanding why it's not a priority still, like what is not working with the techniques that are actually used for communicating that there is a problem like this.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Yeah. I don't know. There's some stuff that people just don't want to know about also, unfortunately. And usually they are the most important. So finding a way to deal with that, to make it cool to care.
But thank you. Anyway.
Thank you, Alessia. And also, one of the reasons why we do this is exactly this, to create implications, to inspire change, and also to bring these insights to policymakers and to some other industrial stakeholders, to actually make them aware and also hold them accountable for the change that some of them are quite resistant about. So thank you for your insights and inspirational comments and thoughts. Any final takeaways or reflections or further questions? Vinit, would you like to say something?
So what I hear is, I think your research also shows that if consumers are educated, the change is possible, right?
Yep.
So the educated, so what kind of education is happening right now? I think we have to look at that. It's only increasing the consumption is what we are focusing on, the industry is focusing on, right? So that focus needs to shift. And that focus can only shift if the business models change. So I think it's a circle, basically. It again starts with business model because we are in the capitalist economic setup. So within that, if the business model does not change, the brands will not educate consumers in the right way, which is required. Right? So if that is not going to happen, the change is not going to happen.
Yep. Yeah, but I think this is one of the most challenging, right? This changing business models, or those ideas of, decoupling, your year-to-year growth from just selling new products, right? So production volumes and stuff like that, I think are really interesting questions, but they're super hard to answer in a world that's already going fast and accelerating by the day. It's a bit crazy how we're going to be able to just shift direction. I think they're really interesting questions, but I'm afraid I don't even have an idea to share with you right now. It's a super hard question. But yeah, it's a lifetime's work.
Thank you.
But I
Thank
agree
you,
with you, absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. And thank you for the honest answer, and thank you, Vinit, for the great reflection. Actually, this is a perfect transition to introduce some of the further discussions that we will have in the next episodes, because we will also discuss post-growth by understanding how social and ecological well-being can be integrated at the heart of business model. So then how can we really start seeing things differently rather than seeing sustainability as a risk mitigation tool? And we will try to really explore the transition pathway to achieve that, which is actually just transition. And this is one of the scientific arguments that some of us at the union are working around. So watch the space. We will have more discussions about the future of fashion as a system and future of fashion supply chains around post-growth, just transitions, and all these concepts will be quite intertwined and integrated. So you are more than welcome to join in the also future conversations. Having said that, a really warm thank you to all of you. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Jean-Sébastien, for your great presentation, and we really enjoyed.
My pleasure.
And thank you so much. We will upload the recording on YouTube, and we will keep on having these conversations online. So thank you so much for your time, and we will see you at the next UCRF Knowledge Circle session.
Absolutely. Thank you for hosting us.
Thanks, Sebastien.
Thank you, Paul.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.